let us resume our reading of The No Side by Jim DeMint, Saving Freedom, of the issue about big government. The article actually started on page 46, but we will resume on page 49. Why restrain the growth of the federal government? Most members of Congress act like the Constitution is no longer relevant and seem to believe we should continue to expand federal programs whenever and wherever we see fit. But no reasonably informed, thinking American would believe unrestrained government spending would be good for our country. I will discuss in later chapters the corruption, incompetence, and mismanagement and devastating societal impact of congressional meddling in all areas of American culture and economic life. The focus of this chapter, however, is the financial condition of our country. The most compelling arguments to stop the growth of the federal government are our government's unsustainable levels of spending and debt, which could result in the financial collapse of our government and our private sector economic structure. Government spending represented only a small fraction of the private economy until the 20th century. Since World War II, government spending has hovered around 20% of GDP. Remember, that means gross domestic product. Economic cycles over the past several decades have confirmed that good economic growth can occur when government spending stays below 20%. The U.S. economy has usually slowed and declined as government spending exceeded 20%. Government spending now exceeds 20% and will surpass 40% in about 30 years. Equally troubling is the growing national debt owed by the American people. Over recent decades, Americans' debt has grown but has stayed below 50% of GDP because our economy has continued to grow. Based on current projections, however, our debt will soon explode and dramatically eclipse our total economy. Unless major reforms are enacted quickly, Americans will face devastating economic consequences. Americans have been told so many times about an impending crisis, they no longer take these alarms seriously. The energy crisis, the Social Security crisis, the housing crisis, the mortgage crisis, the Wall Street crisis, the auto industry crisis, the recession crisis, and of course the global warming crisis are all examples of recent problems used for political manipulation. Global warming, which is now being used as an excuse to expand dramatically the power and control of government, may not even be a man-made phenomenon. The science on this issue is far from conclusive, yet Congress is in a virtual panic to implement massive taxes on our economy to punish the users of coal and gas. Unlike politically manufactured crises, the catastrophic financial course of the federal government is an absolute fact. Without major reforms, there is no plausible survivable scenario for our economy. This is not a problem that might occur in the distant future. The nation's debt, out-of-control spending, and loose monetary policy are creating worldwide economic insecurity. It seems inexplicable that Congress is completely ignoring this problem, ignoring the warnings. During the hurried debate and political panic of the Wall Street debacle in late 2008, I remember many of my Senate and House colleagues expressing disbelief that there had been no warning of the crisis. The fact is, there were ample warnings for more than 10 years. Congressional leaders chose not to act because the government-sponsored entities, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and Wall Street were doing their bidding, in addition to making consistently large financial contributions to their campaign accounts. Easy and cheap credit were allowing more people to buy homes and cars, accomplishing the dual goals of artificially raising the standard of living for lower-income Americans and keeping our economy running on steroids. The problem with steroids is they eventually destroy the people who use them. Loose monetary policy created a financial house of cards destined to crash. But unqualified borrowers and unscrupulous lenders were not the only ones who suffered. Much of the savings of responsible, hard-working Americans evaporated almost overnight. Once the panic ensued, many politicians were quick to blame others and claimed they had sent a letter warning of the coming crisis. Baloney. Congress, well known for its doublespeak and dishonesty, outdid itself during the economic rescue debate. The people who blocked reforms and received the most campaign contributions from the guilty parties were the ones in charge of negotiating the irresponsible bailouts. The result was several $trillion borrowed against America's future and an unprecedented intrusion by the federal government into the private economy. I'm afraid neither Congress nor the majority of the American people learned their lesson. We are now ignoring a much more serious warning. America's massive and growing debt is today's greatest threat to America's prosperity. Early in 2008, the Comptroller General of the United States, David M. Walker, began to travel the country trying to warn Americans about our unsustainable level of spending and debt. Almost no one paid attention. His warnings did not appear on the nightly news of the major television networks. Mr. Walker's presentation, titled "Saving Our Future Requires Tough Choices Today," revealed that mandatory spending, required by law, for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid entitlements had grown from 16% of federal spending in 1966 to 40% of the entire federal budget in 2006. The large wave of baby boomers now reaching retirement age promises to make this problem much worse. Most of this spending has been taken from funds that should have been used for the primary constitutional responsibility of the federal government, defense. Military spending dropped from 43% in 1966 to 20% in 2006. While smart bombs and other new high-tech weapon systems have lulled Americans into a false sense of security, our military is fighting with one hand tied behind its back. In the age of terrorism, our intelligent capabilities are woefully lacking. Our Air Force is flying many antiquated planes, often more than 40 years old, and the scheduled replacement rates guarantee a worsening situation. So much of our military spending is directed by political earmarks from congressmen and senators with parochial interests that we make it harder for our military leaders to develop coherent plans to defend our nation. My point is this: there is a terrible cost to unrestrained government spending and debt. Part of that cost is the neglect and real national priorities such as defense. The other costs are the devaluation of our currency, the destruction of our private sector economy, and the loss of wealth and quality of life for all Americans. Principles and institutions. Government is an essential institution for the development and protection of freedom. We must have a framework of law, order, and justice for freedom to grow and thrive. Government makes the rules and enforces them, much like the officials at a football game. Players and coaches have the freedom to do whatever they want as long as they follow the rules. When they don't, the officials throw a flag and impose a penalty. But the officials don't call the plays or decide who gets to play. Officials don't manage the game, and the federal government shouldn't try to manage America. America's government has grown well beyond the constitutional framework provided by our founders. Our federal government is no longer the referee for our economy and culture. It is now the biggest player on the field. Our federal government is trying to manage many aspects of America's economy and social services. It is not an exaggeration to say that the results have been catastrophic. Not only has the government inhibited the growth of our economy and undermined our culture, it has put our country on an unsustainable financial course that must be reversed immediately. And that marks the end of the No Side article. You can start writing your paper right now. Talk to you later.